Ooh. Two books. David Eddings, The Belgariad, volumes 1 and 2. These are nice printings. Decent sized pages, decent sized text on the page. I really liked reading this one, man. This was cool. I'm very much into that like ultra orthodox, old school epic fantasy. Volume 1 contains 3 books: Pawn of Prophecy, Queen of Sorcery, Magician's Gambit, and Volume 2 is two books, longer ones: Castle of Wizardry and Enchanter's Endgame. And man, let me just say, if any of those titles sparked your interest at all, this is probably for you. This is good stuff, man. This is some of the post-Tolkien, where the style of epic or heroic fantasy was pretty much already calcified. So, I mean, dude, right off the bat, like, check it out here. Dude's holding a glowing magic sword. Young guy follows him. That's Belgariad. He's the main character throughout. Starts off with him as a pretty young lad. I'm not exactly sure. Probably, I think he's like 8 years old. He's working on a farm. Later it's revealed, and I'm going to try to be as tight with spoilers as possible about this, but let's just say that none of these will really surprise you if you've read any fantasy at all. But Gary on there, he starts off with a job as a pot washer at a farm. He's got this old lady. He thinks that she's his aunt. She's kind of instructing him on stuff. She's wise and hard and shrewd. And pretty soon it's revealed that Garion is not just a farm boy. He's got a destiny to fulfill because of some blood that he carries. His bloodline is always fought this. He's some kind of evil wizard. Like I said, it's just kind of hard for me to talk about without giving stuff away that is actually kind of interesting to read about. But the long and short of it is, there's some kind of evil and super powerful magician that has been entombed or kept in some kind of stasis. He's been trapped by magic, but he's gonna break free, man. He's coming back for your ass, and there is nobody left to fight him because all the other heroes have died except for Garion. But it's too early. Yeah, that's right. There's some other wizards, some good wizards, who know about all these prophecies, and they know that the big bad guy is coming out of retirement to start laying waste. But Garion himself is untrained. This all happened earlier than the wizards expected. So that's where a lot of the tension in this book comes in, is with basically Garion being forced to take on the responsibilities of learning wizardry and swordsmanship. So, like a lot of the good fantasy and stuff, this is essentially a coming-of-age story in the literal and figurative way. Garion's just a kid. He's traveling with these very experienced warriors and magicians, and there's a lot of traveling in these books. I'm talking a lot of traveling. Garion is, I think, close to 16 by the end of the book. So it's something like 6 to 8 years between the beginning and the end. And that's pretty cool. That's quite a time lapse between the introduction and the conclusion of the story. I really like to see that kind of thing. It's much more interesting than being hyper-focused on a little point in time and then having a time skip where it's like, such and such years later, here's the things that had changed. You get to see it all unfold in relatively real time. And it's not dragged out, though there are a lot of scenes of traveling, a lot of horses being bought, a lot of horses being exchanged, a lot of horses being rested, a lot of tents raised, a lot of firewood found and burned, a lot of hanging out by the fire and talking about stuff. And the talking about stuff is actually probably the best part of this whole book. You got some really fun characters coming in here. Once again, Lord of the Rings style. The Fellowship here is all made up of people from different races, different backgrounds, and they all possess different ideals and morals. A lot of them relatively flexible. Even the Gandalf stand-in is you get surprised at the stuff that he gets himself into. I'll say that he's kind of known as like a roguish, drunken wanderer, storyteller type, but this is a cool kind of character introduction where you see the character by their reputation, which kind of only gives you an indication of what they're like at the surface level at first. But as Garion especially gets more intimate with all the different people that he travels with, things from their past start to emerge, and it's always a kind of an one of those things that pokes its way into the story. It's kind of sideways, causes a bump for the characters that they all have to get around. And it's done in a good way. It's not just like video game style side quests where it's like, oh, such and such's problems have arisen from his past, and now we have to go off on this sidetrack and try to correct those. No, it's a lot more interesting than that. It's stuff that is really naturally woven into the main narrative of Garion, learning about his powers and his past, so that when he comes to confront the final boss of this whole story, he's prepared, or if not prepared, he at least has a fighting chance, which is another cool encroaching tension where you start to feel, along with Garion, the pressure of what he's about to come up against. Keep in mind, this bad guy is dude used to rule the world. Like, he's that powerful. He was subdued by many other powerful magicians, but at this point in the history of this world, it's only Garion. It's all up to him. He doesn't have anybody to help him. Well, that's not quite true. He has history on his side, so that's where the magic sword comes in. It's forged by one of the heroes that helped to fight the big bad guy long ago, and some of his power was put into it. So there's a very cool running theme of the past and of history, and how it is not precisely circular in a way, but as somebody whose name is definitely extant, but I just can't remember what it is, said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does echo. And that comes through a lot in this, not just with Garion's bloodline and the natural capabilities that he's endowed with as a carrier of this magical bloodline, but that stuff that happened in the past that appeared to be just circumstantial or relatively irrelevant actually comes back in a big way and creates causes a huge shift in what the expected timeline would be. And this mostly comes through because a couple of the main characters are very, very well versed in the prophecies of old and the histories of the gods and their various encounters and strains in their relationships. But once again, probably the best part of this whole thing is just when the people are hanging out and talking to each other. One of the guys is a very very strictly disciplined and comes off as stuck up knight of one of the major empires in their world, and he comes off as annoying and annoyingly rigid to a lot of the characters at first. And it's not until some stuff about what he has come through is revealed that he becomes more accepted. His advice is heeded more readily by the other characters. There's another guy who is appears to be just a professional thief, but so he's perceived as untrustworthy by the others when they first meet up. But turns out that he has a royal lineage of his own, and the circumstances that led to him becoming a thief rather than a ruler is pretty interesting. All of it's pretty interesting, and the dialogue is great. There's plenty of humor in the book. That was something that I don't normally expect a lot out of when I start reading fantasy. A lot of times it is rigid because authors have that way of making it feel very very formal and exotic. So a lot of times humor doesn't really come through except for when it's a little bit wry. But in this, characters will just straight up tell jokes about each other, and there's quips and banter, and it's all really fun to read. I'm just remembering stuff right now, and like I said, a lot of the fun comes from these guys from totally different backgrounds having to deal with one another's quirks and such. So that was probably my favorite part, but there are some badass action scenes as well. You get your monsters, of course. There's some pretty freaky ones. There's wolves, of course. Like you got your classic fantasy stuff. There's some kind of horse, or something. It's like carnivorous. Don't remember specifically. There's some pretty weird, freaky animals. Some kind of Bigfoot, barbarian type crossover creature that they have to fight, and it's pretty good because the characters rarely run into a situation where it's just like, all right, boys, time to get your swords out and let's cut our way through this, and then they just move on to the next encounter. It's almost every single time they run into a situation where fighting is necessary, everything's on the line. Everything could end right there. The author doesn't go super hard into all that, but the feeling is conveyed plenty that that fighting and violence are not just run-of-the-mill things that fantasy heroes deal with. It's always a high stakes encounter. One in particular, there's a part that's pretty fun where a couple of the craftier characters and the hero Garion disguise themselves as members of a race of shamanic tribesmen, and demonic invocations is a huge part of their culture. So they have to try to sneak through this area, basically playing at being powerful conjurers, and of course that fails, and they actually do get into a demon summoning duel, which is pretty badass. It's very fun to read about, and of course, the thing that every great fantasy novel has to have is a fated meeting, and the way that tension is built up is done well. It's subtle. The author's subtle with everything, really. Nothing's ham-fisted, although it's all very straightforward. There's nothing clever or coy, so it's refreshingly pure when you're reading it. And when the actual climactic clash does occur, well, there's actually more than one, but whenever it does happen, it's resolved in that way that, again, like, here's one of those things where I'm trying to sidestep massive spoilers, but the resolutions are very satisfying. There's no crazy twists, loops, or curveballs that will make you go, like, nothing to make you go, what the heck is this guy thinking? How do we get here? But there are plenty of surprises, and it's very, very satisfying in the way that the conclusion of a symphony is satisfying, where everything is just wrapped up. There are no loose threads. Although, that's not 100% true. There's plenty of indications, especially near the end of this story, that there is a continuation. And there is. David Eddings did write some more books with these same characters in this same world, and I am definitely going to get around to those, because while these 2 volumes, 5 books, all wrap up nicely on their own, you won't need any other supplementary material to get everything there is to get out of them. The writing style is enough that I will go off and read some of this dude's other books, even if he wasn't writing fantasy. David Eddings did a good job with these. So if you've got a penchant for that post-Tolkien traditional high fantasy, like I said, lots of fires, lots of cooking, lots of rowdy taverns, lots of mysterious wizards. You got a snooty, bitchy princess. You got an underdog hero. You got a sneaky thief with the royal bloodline. You got a stuck-up knight with the forbidden romance in his past. You've got a badass berserker style Norse barbarian dude with some marital problems that come up a little bit later that are pretty funny. It's good stuff, man. I would highly recommend it to anybody who just really enjoys cool stories like that. Nothing high and mighty about it. Like I said, the author never gets clever. It's all very direct and very concise. Really fun to read. Good stuff. Good job, Mr. Eddings. Don't even know if you're still alive, but if you are, I hope that these are the happiest days of your life.